The FBI has arrested a suspect in the case.
Then, just weeks after Patsy Ramsey's death, came a giant break in the case.
John Mark Carr, 41 years old, was arrested for the murder of JonBenet Ramsey.
Did you know that there was an arrest in the Ramsey case? One arrest.
Nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Welcome to this brand new mini-series exclusive to members only. This is part 1. You are going to find it's quite a lot edgier than the other content. I hope you'll find also that the level of research is also kind of at a higher level. So earlier I said, did you know that there was an arrest in the Ramsey case? One arrest, and that happened on August 17th, 2006. And that arrest lasted about 12 days. Less than 2 weeks. And then John Mark Carr was sort of unarrested. A headline from NBC News reads, Carr cleared in JonBenet Ramsey case, and that was dated 28 August 2006.
How embarrassing. How embarrassing.
That was really one of the biggest blunders from anyone who was sort of pursuing the Intruder theory. It was an Intruder theory based move, if one can put it that way. You never hear John Ramsey talking about this. You never hear him when he criticizes the investigation. He never brings up this absolute embarrassment to the entire investigation. You kind of do wonder, like, what were you thinking to sort of go down this route to begin with? So can we on this channel do any better? Well, let's have a look. When we began our review of the Ramsey case on this channel, we started by looking at the dubious attempt to retell the Ramsey case on Netflix. I think many of you will agree that that narrative was pretty poor form. And frankly, I can't tell whether Joe Berlinger is doing an intentional revision of history, or if his efforts are just so clumsy and so ignorant that that's what it amounts to. It's hard to say whether this is just someone who doesn't quite know the case that well and they meant well, or whether there's some sort of other agenda taking place. I suppose one could say it could simply be innocent revisionism. But I don't really think that's really where we need to apply our minds. What I can tell you, whether it's accidental or intentional, the Netflix apologia in episode 3 is particularly dire, and that's the area I want to address and I guess improve upon. Just tell a story in a much better way, in a more informed way. And so if we go back to that third episode, you may remember what had happened in episode 1 and 2 was that the Netflix series basically cleared the Ramseys via Lou Smith's superior, that's quote-unquote superior intruder theory, and then the series kind of in episode 3 throws a few suspects out there, kind of like throwing pasta against the ceiling and seeing what sticks. It could be this guy. Hold on, this guy is a dead ringer for JonBenet's killer. Okay, wait a minute now. Check out this guy. And on ad nauseum. In other words, think about how the Ramsey case started with a ransom note and how the cops were made to run in circles long enough to cast suspicion elsewhere. First it started with, well, I think it could be the housekeeper, then it could be one of John Ramsey's co-workers, then it could be the housekeeper's husband, and so on. Now imagine that running around in circles is actually meant to go on for decades and decades and decades. And the point being, you're not really supposed to get anywhere. You're just supposed to run around in circles. It's like much ado about nothing. A lot of activity that doesn't really end up taking you anywhere. And if you think about a lot of these documentaries, that's exactly what happens. The Ramseys didn't do it. Okay, well then who did do it? Well, maybe it's this guy, maybe not. Maybe it's that guy. How about this one? How about that one? On and on and on. And, you know, the most deplorable part of it is that some media and some folks are happy playing this duplicitous, pointless game of Ring a Rosie. Now, if you take Netflix, in episode 3, you'd imagine it's about reaching some sort of denouement. You know, by the third episode, okay, we're now going to make our case. We're going to bring it to some sort of conclusion. It's going to have a point to it. And instead, they spent a particularly long time wasting our time on one of the silliest suspects ever associated with this case, John Mark Carr. And we're going to talk about him in a moment. Before we get to that, do watch this space for parts 2 and 3 of the series. And then I'll be following up this series with another series titled A Second Opinion. So look out for that. Remember, this audio that you're listening to will also be posted on Patreon's $5 tier. So that's also exclusive access to those folks on Patreon. The $5 tier is also where where the patrons get access to the short audiobooks. There are about a dozen on the $5 tier. Okay, and let's get started. So episode 3 spends a third of its length, upwards of 20 minutes, barking up the John Mark Carr tree. I just want you to think about that. Spending 20 minutes telling a story about a particular suspect. And let me contrast this. If you go through literally all of my analysis, hundreds of posts and videos, there's something like almost 500 posts on Patreon alone on the JonBenet Ramsey case. Many videos, probably close to 200, almost a dozen books that I've written. I virtually never deal with John Mark Carr. Why do you think that is? I'll tell you why. Because I don't like wasting your attention spans. Also don't like wasting my own time. I'm not going to tell his story, as you've heard here.
Just weeks after Patsy Ramsey's death came a giant break in the case.
I'm not going to tell you there's a giant break in the case, only to tell you at the end, oh, sorry, it's not him after all. And that is the bottom line. It's not him. A DNA test cleared Carr, but he also had an alibi. And at the end of the day, not only was Carr cleared of all charges in the Ramsey case, just think about that. He's never been convicted of a single offense against a child anywhere ever. And that is also disclosed in the Netflix series. He's not been convicted of any crime against children anywhere ever. Now, if you want a cut-to-the-chase version of the Intruder theory, here it is. The Intruder theory provides this superior investigation template. All the big names are there. John Douglas, Lou Smith. And then you have all the big media pushing it. You've got also John and Patsy, Dr. Phil and Burke, and their lawyer. They occasionally are participating as well. And then for them to go, after all of that, for them to go, well, maybe it's this guy, only for it not to be him. Maybe it's that guy, only for it not to be him. And this process repeats itself endlessly, as if that's a better theory. And you kind of get the feeling that's kind of what's happening with Lou Smith's list. Is it this guy? No. How about that guy? No. How about that guy? That's not really much of a legacy for a legendary detective. And it's also not a terribly good legacy for John Douglas, this master criminal profiler, either. And so let's pick names out of a hat and discuss them for 28 years like it's getting us anywhere, and say this is a much better investigation than the alternative from the clueless Boulder cops. Really, is that so? And then after a few years, let's rinse and repeat. Wow, chase your own tail investigation's really smart. And believe it or not, just 2 days ago, News Nation picked Chris Wolf's name out of a hat as if it's new evidence. Right now, breaking news, bombshell news, Chris Wolf has emerged as a suspect in this case. And once again, this is not breaking news. Chris Wolf sued the Ramseys for implicating him in their book written in 2000. That's how old the Chris Wolf suspect is, right? 28 years. And of course, Ashley Banfield is right to point out that Chris Wolf didn't even get a mention in the apparently crystal clear Netflix series. He didn't even make the short list of suspects, but apparently now he does.
Yeah, do you have any idea if
Do you have any idea why this particular story seems to have been somewhat buried? I mean, it wasn't in the Netflix documentary that recently came out, which has been sort of the new generation's introduction to your daughter's case.
Stay tuned for the next analysis in the series coming up within the next day or two. So look out for that. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And I'll see you guys next time.